Hey, welcome back. I'm Patrick with Portrayal Press, and we're here restoring a 1943 Willys MB tub. So what I want to do today is take you around a little bit and show you. I've also got about 10 hours working on the driver's side, which was my plan. Fix the driver's side, and then come back to the passenger side, fix that, put the tailgate in, put the inner fender wells in. I want to walk you around, show you what I've done, and then we're going to do a little bit more work on the driver's side and show you how that's coming along. Step one was to remove the extra panel that had been welded on the back, which we did by grinding off the welds on the sides. Step two was to look at the actual rear panel, and we decided we were going to have to remove that. So we drilled out a ton of spot welds, and I'll show you the rear panel in a second, and took it off. It was pinch spot welded along this flange. Now, I want to point out, I removed this flange. I preserved the flange as a part of doing this, but I removed the flange because I had to bend a bunch of sheet metal in here, and it was fighting me. So I cut it off because it's easy enough to weld it back. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the damage when we talk about the driver's side, and I'll explain to you what they did, because this tub has been messed with quite a bit. So the next area is the floor. And as I mentioned to you, the floor was pushed back and buckled up on itself. I left this here just to show you. I straightened this. It's not fully straightened, but I got it pretty straight. And I've got to cut this piece off and pull this back out as well. You can really see how folded it was in the corner right here. This hit really hard, and it folded this 18 gauge metal right back up on top of itself, which is one of the reasons why we had to remove the inner fender well to get to this, to straighten it correctly, because otherwise the floor wasn't going to meet the rear panel correctly when we got this done. Rear panel, this is it. We got it off the Jeep. Now, I started to repair this, and after taking it off, decided that probably wasn't a good idea, and here's why. There are a ton of dents in it, and it's not accessible because of the hat channels in the back to repair these dents easily. So really, if you want it to look super nice, you've got to remove all the hat channels, which is a lot of spot weld drilling. It takes a lot of time. Then you've got to repair the sheet metal, which, you know, is repairable. But the other issue is that there was metal cut off on this thing before I got it. So I've got to add metal back as well. That combination was more than I wanted to do, so I called up my happy and friendly Jeep supplier and ordered a Joe's Motor Pool rear panel, which came in and is absolutely gorgeous. We'll show it to you at the end. So the next step was to remove the inner passenger fender well, which involved a lot of spot weld drilling. So I got pretty good at drilling spot welds out. I was able to remove most of these spot welds in the back section, but when I got to the front section, they had pinch spot welded it very, very close to the edge of the inner fender well, and so there was not sufficient room. I was coming in at an angle, and when you put a spot weld drill on an angle, it rolls off. So what I ended up having to do was drill those spot welds out from the outside, which causes a different set of work because now I've got to fill in holes on the outside of the fender. But the good news is the tub is now all open. I've got access to the rear floor. I've got access to both sides of the rear tub, and I can straighten all the dents, which is what we're going to do a little bit more of today. So I'm about 7.5, 8 hours into repairing the driver's side, and it's coming out pretty well. I started in the rear corner, and I used my hammer and my dolly, and I basically straightened all this out. I did a little bit of metal shrinking, which I had to do because there was extra metal in here. And then I started working this way. And that's what I've been doing, working toward the front. And this collision, or the damage, whatever happened to this tub, they hit it pretty hard because it bent this lip in here, and it basically crushed all this back like this, which means all this area right here has got stretched metal. So everything in here needs to be shrunk. And so that's really what I've been doing, spending a lot of time. I'm shrinking with an oxy-acetylene torch. You can also use a shrinking disc, which you can buy, which would work fine in this. It makes a hell of a lot of noise if you use one, but they work fine. I actually like the oxy-acetylene because it's more versatile and I've got more control over what I'm doing. You can also get yourself into trouble though. So if you're just starting off, you might want a shrinking disc first, but I would say go ahead and get up the curve and learn with an oxy-acetylene if you've got access to it. So what we're going to do right now, I'm still getting a little bit of, there's a little bit of puckering in here. So I've got to shrink a little bit more metal right in this area right here. And I've also got to shrink a little bit more in here. And actually, I don't know if you can see, but the metal split here. I didn't touch this, this was just their repair. But as I've been moving things back to where they belong, there's a lot of tension right in here, and they didn't weld this very well, or they ground it down. And you can see where there's been repair work done in here. It came off, which I'm not too worried about actually. I'm gonna leave it this way and shrink this area back down. I can feel it right here, and shrink this back in, so hopefully that'll tighten up by itself. And my goal right now is we're going to get this cleaned up about to right here and be pretty happy with this. Maybe we'll do a little more shrinking, maybe we'll do a little hammer and dolly work, and I'll also show you the body files and how you use those to really get this nice and looking flat. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the oxy-acetylene torch and I'm heating up a section of metal about the size of a dime, maybe a little larger, to kind of cherry, and then I'm taking the hammer and I'm hitting with the dolly behind it, backing it up. I'm hitting around the outside of the heated area a little bit, lightly tapping it, and then sort of finishing it with a tap or two in the middle of the heated area as it starts cooling down. Then I'm quenching it with water, and that's shrinking the metal back. Oil canning is almost gone. There's a little bit left in there, but see that metal move, you know? Really interesting, isn't it? Man, you see that? Can you see that well?
Yeah.
It just pulls it right up, didn't it? It's crazy, isn't it? Once you've shrunk the metal and you've gotten it pretty much back to the plane that you want it in, you want to start the final finishing process, which is to get all the little dents out so that you can really put a nice finish on this vehicle. So one of the best tools is old school body files. Now you can buy these online from Eastwood and some places like that. I bought these used off eBay for 10 bucks. They're great. What they're used for is really showing you where the high spots are so that then you can take your hammer and your dolly and go back in and work on them. So another tool that everybody should have in their arsenal is a slapper, a shrinker. And I made this out of a file. There are a couple people on the internet and YouTube that do this. I just took an old file and I bent it. And again, you're going to use it just like you would with a hammer and a dolly, but what it ends up doing is helping you shrink the high spots. So you hit it with the body file, you got high spots, then you're going to use a hammer and a dolly. You may use your torch again to shrink, or you may use a slapper like this to try to get everything back flat. But remember, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and back here you can see we did this here. There were a lot of dents in this, and this is now perfectly straight metal on this end, and you can see the high spots and places and low spots that need to be worked on. But if you're patient and you stick with it, you can get this back to looking perfectly new. And I think our goal is that the next time we shoot a video that I'm going to show you polished metal that's not going to have any dents in it. So that's the goal. We'll see if we make it. So that's a wrap. I've got to get a little bit more work done on this panel before it's going to be ready to paint. There's going to be a bunch more hammer and dolly work and sort of fiddling. I've got to do a little more shrinking in here. But I think it's going to come out really, really nice. And then once I'm done with that side, I got to go to the passenger side, do the same process again in preparation for reinstalling those inner fender wells, and then finally get to the rear panel and put that on. But I think the end is near. I'm 25 hours into this thing, got lots of work ahead of me, but I think I may make my 100-hour budget. We'll see. So Patrick Tipton signing off. Keep your corners square, get out in your shop, get something done, and thanks again for tuning in.